Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyav Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantir Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantir Me Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra Sukhinas Santu, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukha Bhag Bhavet, Sarvastaratu Durgani, Sarvo Bhadrani Pashyatu, Sarvas Sadbuddhimapnotu, Sarvas Sarvatra Nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayeti Rudrayate Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Paki Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. We begin today on verse number 23, that's on page 279 of your books. So let's chant together. Yepyanya devata bhakta yajante shraddhayanvitaha Tepi mameva kaunteya yajantya vidhipurvakam. Even those devotees of other gods who worship them endowed with faith worship me alone, O son of Kunti, though in an unauthorized way. The earlier verse which we studied last time is one of the very important verses, as we saw. And what the earlier verse simply said is this, that oftentimes sincere seekers of God are faced with one dilemma at some stage or other. And that is the kind of dilemma we have about how much time I should devote to my spiritual life and how much time I should devote to my other responsibilities in life. Every one of us has many responsibilities, many things to do, and there is always this tension about, yes, I recognize spiritual life is important, I need to do something about it, and doing anything about anything needs time and energy. But there are other things to be done as well. So there is always this question about how much time should I devote to this? And this kind of a time management and energy management, we have to do all the time. There can be, it's not just about spiritual life and other things. Even on other things, there is not just one other thing. So there is time for family, there is time for work, there is, if you are interested in games or sports, then how much time should I devote to that? If you are interested in gardening, how much time should I give to that? And so since the time available to us is constant, there was one book many years ago which came, some of you may have seen that, it's a kind of a slim little booklet which says how to live 24 hours a day. And what it said was this, that time is one of the most democratic forces, that no matter a person rich or poor, east or west, irrespective of anything else, everyone gets just 24 hours a day. Not a minute more, not a minute less. Now, how we employ those 24 hours, how we divide it, where we utilize it, that freedom we have. But we cannot get more than 24 hours a day. So there is this importance of time management. And every one of us, sooner or later, come to some kind of an internal arrangement about how much time I should give to this. And that's perfectly fine. It's as long as there are no inner conflicts. But sometimes it may so happen that your interest, say, in praying or meditating might become so intense. And it's like this. Once you start enjoying something, you want to have more of it. It's like let's say if you like rasagullas, and if they're serving rasagullas, then if everyone is served one each, and then you eat it, and if you love it, then you wouldn't mind having one more. And if they say, eat as much as you want, you will have as much as you want. So if there is something we enjoy, then we want more of it. If there's something we don't enjoy, then we want as little of it as possible. If possible, we don't want it at all. So sometimes when people begin the practice of meditation, and if they ask the question, how much minimum should I do every day? That question is like, I don't particularly enjoy it, but I think it's important. So just tell me, I'll do the minimum. So we never ask that question about a food that we enjoy. Like, how much minimum should I eat rasagulla if you enjoy rasagulla? Well, more the merrier. So exactly in the same way, as we begin to take spiritual life seriously, and as we begin to find more and more joy in our practice of prayer, worship, meditation, service, study, it's no more a chore. It's no more like, oh, one of the duties, one of the things that I need to do every day. It's something you enjoy doing, then you want to do more about it. Now, once you want to do more of something, then obviously you're going to have less time to do something else. That's when this question comes, like, now, if I do more of this, then something else is going to suffer. What the verse that we saw earlier, it's a very important verse, this 22nd verse, was this, that if at any time you feel, I want to just immerse myself in God, that time, let not the worry, oh, then who will pay my bills? Who will do everything else? Let not that hold you back. That if your whole mind is given to God, to the point that you become incapable of doing anything else, not because you don't want to do it, not because you're lazy, not because you want to avoid work, but you become incapable of doing it. We see that in the life of Ramakrishna. When he, as I said, he was employed, he drew a monthly salary, he was a priest in a temple, he had his duties, he carried out his duties, and of course he was also praying and meditating the rest of the time. Now a stage was reached in his life when that prayer and meditation consumed him so much that he wasn't able to do his duties as laid out in that job description. Not because he didn't want to do it, not because he didn't like it, but his mind was completely given to God. And we see from his life that whatever he wanted just came from very unexpected sources in most unexpected ways. Now, that doesn't happen only to him. What the Gita points out is, any seeker of God, if you completely depend on God alone, you're not consciously avoiding any duty, not consciously avoiding any responsibility. But if you depend on God alone, whatever it is that you're not able to do, God takes care of it. But as long as I have my ego, then I need to take care of it. If I don't have the ego, it's like this. See, little babies, they may have after a few weeks kind of a vague sense of I, but they don't have this sense of, oh, now I must go and get myself some food and eat. What do the babies do? They're completely dependent on the mother. At the most, if they are hungry or sleepy, the only thing they know is cry. That's all, or just scream. And the mother knows exactly what the baby wants. So when the baby is hungry, mother feeds the baby. The baby doesn't pass sleepless night wondering, oh, will I get my milk tomorrow or not? Nothing. The baby is completely dependent on God. Now, if we can become like little babies, completely dependent on God, then you really don't even have to pray. Now, let me explain this because this can be easily misunderstood. See, there are different kinds of prayers, but most prayers that we, at the very basic level, prayer is a form of seeking. That you ask God to say, God, give me this, give me that. Now, even when you say, give me this, give me that, your I is still there. But when your I is completely given to God, you really become incapable of praying. I mean, what are you going to ask for yourself when that yourself itself now is given to God? And as I said, the extreme form of prayer, which is kind of, it's very unusual prayer. We find in the life of one of the saints in southern India. He was sometime in the 8th or 9th century, I think. So that saint's sense of I had so completely vanished that when he began a so-called prayer, the only thing that this devotee could say was, God, may you live long, may you have no difficulties. So now it sounds awful. It just doesn't make sense at all. A devotee telling God, may you live long, may you have no difficulties. What it shows is this, that when your I is completely gone, what is the sign of love? Love means I is completely gone. You're only thinking about the object of your love. So it's all about you. So when this devotee prays to God, the devotee is not thinking about himself or herself. The devotee is thinking only about God. And such is that love. This devotee says, God, I want you to be happy. I want you to live long. May there be no difficulties in your life. As I said, if you try to think about it logically, makes no sense. But if you understand it from the eyes of love, then you understand what this removing of that ego means. Now, when that happens, God takes care of everything. So that is what we saw in a verse number 22. Now, what this verse points out, that even those, now what does other gods mean? Now, how many gods are there? That's a question. And we know that if you ask even not just people from different religious traditions, even people from the same religious tradition, who do you worship? And in general, people say, well, I worship God or I pray to God. But I mean, God is such a generic term. Then if you really say, well, who exactly? What kind of a God are you praying to? And you might get very different answers. Because God may have made us in His own image, according to the Bible, but in some ways, we create God in our image too. Which is why, because our minds are different, the way we conceive of that Supreme Being is colored by our own needs, by our own orientation toward that highest reality. And so, in some ways, we are all worshipping, every one of us is worshipping his or her own perception of that infinite being. Now, if I see the God that I worship as this is my God, your God you worship, your God is different. So, if the God I worship I see as separate from other gods, then what Krishna is saying is that even people who worship this God, who they in their mind think is different from other gods, is really worshipping that same one God, but doing it unknowingly, doing it not in a way it ought to be done. So that's that basically. It's almost like, well, I'm not able to think of any example right now. But you get the point that even those people who worship in their mind with this limited idea of God is really worshipping that one infinite being. And unauthorized way is avidhi purvakam, not in a way it ought to be done. So sometimes we do things unknowingly. We are doing it, we are not thinking correctly, but we are doing it okay. That's the idea. It'll be clarified in the next verse 24. Aham hi sarvayajnanam bhokta cha prabhureva cha natumam abhijananti tatvena taschavantite. I am the enjoyer and the Lord also of all sacrifices, but they do not know me in truth, therefore they fall down. So no matter who we pray, all prayers go to that one supreme being. There is a well-known verse in the ancient verse which says that Akashat patitam toyam sagaram pratigacchati sarvadeva namaskaram keshavam pratigacchati. What it means is Akashat patitam toyam, all the water that falls from the sky in the form of rain. So the rain may fall in different places, but all of that water ultimately goes to the ocean. Exactly in the same way, no matter whom you salute, whom you pray to, all those prayers ultimately go to that one divine being. So just like rainwater rains in different places will all end up in the ocean, all prayers will end up with that one supreme being. And yet, those who are not able to recognize this simple truth, they have to keep on. They say, therefore they fall down. By fall down is meant that they have to keep on repeating this cycle of birth and death until they know the truth. So if I do it recognizing the truth, I become free. If I do it without recognizing the truth, although my prayers are going to the same divine being, but my ignorance holds me back from becoming free. So until my ignorance goes away, I'll have to keep on going around in that cycle of birth and death. That's what is meant by they fall down. Verse 25. Yanti deva vrata devan pitrin yanti pitrivrataha bhutani yanti bhuteja yanti madhyajinopimam. The worshippers of the gods go to the gods. The worshippers of the mains go to the mains. The worshippers of the spirits go to the spirits. And my worshippers too come to me. In other words, we go wherever we want to go. That's a simple thing. So worshippers of the gods. Now by gods is meant, if I worship a form of the divine being who I see is, as I said, this is my divine being, different from other divine beings. So the moment I separate out my God from other gods, I have really degraded my God, so to speak. Because it's like this, if my God is infinite, then how can my God be separate from anything else? I mean, if there can be only one being which is infinite. The moment you have more than one, already everyone has become finite. So when I separate out my God from other gods, my God is no more all-pervading. My God is no more omnipotent because there are other than divinities. So that is the kind of God that is mentioned here. So if I worship my little idea of God, I will go there. It's like this. Now in the Indian tradition, for instance, so there are many divinities, many ways the divine is conceived. Some people worship God as Vishnu. Some people worship God as Shiva. Some people worship God as Devi. And then in the books we read, well, Vishnu stays in Vaikuntha, Shiva stays in Kailasa. So everyone has their own abode, own celestial world. Now and there are lots of stories. Some are stories, some are historically true as well, about this kind of a sectarian dogmatism. And there have been oh, my Vishnu is greater than your Shiva, or my Devi is higher than all of this. And of course, in an interreligious context, it can become like whether the Hindu God is more powerful, or a Christian God, or a Muslim God. There can be all these kind of arguments which from a Vedantic standpoint sound so silly, but there are people for whom it's very, very valid. So what is being pointed out here is, if my idea is God is finite, the goal I reach to will also be finite. So that's the idea. So worshippers of the gods, go to the gods. If I'm a worshipper of Vishnu, and I may be a very devout worshipper, there is no questioning my love for Vishnu, but it's still a limited idea of God. I may go to Vaikuntha, stay for some time. I can't stay there infinitely because it's a finite idea of God. I'll have to stay there maybe a little longer than here, but still limited. So that's the idea. Then worshippers of the mains means really the Pitris are really kind of an ancestor worship. So in many traditions, the dominant factor is worshipping of the ancestors. In ancient China, for instance, so one of the ways, the dominant force there is ancestor worship. And even if that may not be a dominant force in the religious tradition in which we have grown, sometimes we might find that we are so devoted to our ancestors. Now, in itself, there's nothing wrong or bad about it. That's great. But if my ancestors become the primal focus of my adoration and worship, then I will go to my ancestors. So, and then in the books describe a separate celestial world where all my ancestors will be there. So Pitriloka, it's called. So where, understand this, but the moment you start asking too many questions about it, then you'll get into real trouble. Because sometimes we ask, so when I die, will I be able to meet, sometimes some of the near and dear ones in our family, we are parents or grandparents who have died before us, and we sometimes think, oh, after I die, I'll be able to meet these people whom I loved so much when they were on this here, and I would like to see them again. And sometimes this kind of belief exists, that after we die, we can meet our family members, our relatives, our friends who have gone before us. As I said, it's a very great, consoling idea. We feel happy about it. But the moment you start asking questions, then you get into difficulty. It's like this. Let's say I loved my grandfather a lot. And I wish that after I die, I hope I get to meet my grandfather. Now the problem is this. Now when I meet my grandfather, what form will I see him? Well, because let's say the memory I have of my grandfather, he was 75 or 80 years old. Now but my grandfather was not all his life 75 or 80 years old. My grandfather was also a little boy at one time. My grandfather was a teenager at one time. Now, when I go, my grandfather will have to become an 80-year-old for me to be able to relate, because I've never seen my grandfather when my grandfather was a teenager or a little boy. Now, what about my grandfather's friends or his contemporaries who also want to meet him? But they have all seen him as a teenager. They may not have seen him as an old person. So they won't be able to recognize him. And for him to meet me, my grandfather has to kind of remain locked up in that 80-year-old body, because if he becomes a young person as he was at one time, then I can't recognize him. Now, I'm just kind of getting into too many details, but you understand the problem about meeting our ancestors because of the time. It's like we have difficulties with going from one time zone to another. Well, this is a much bigger time zone, much bigger gap. And so these kind of practical difficulties can come. So if you don't want to ask all those questions, then enough for you to know that there is some loka, Pitraloka, a world, a celestial world where ancestors are. If you are so devoted to the ancestors, to the exclusion of everything else, you will go to that world where the spirits of the ancestors are. Bhutani yanti bhuteja. Now here the worship of the spirits. By spirit is meant here, not the Atman, as we say. The spirits are sometimes get described as kind of demigods. Demigods is the kind of presence which is below these celestials, below Vishnu, Shiva and others, but above the human, kind of midway. So some people may be devoted to some of these kind of demigods. Now there is a separate world for them. Now what it means is this. Now we will see in life whatever it is that we want to see. Now let me explain. You have read all these descriptions about near-death experiences, for instance. And you will see that what a person sees in that state of what is described as near-death experience is almost always similar to the belief system of that person. And so if you have grown up thinking about heaven or as afterlife as filled with light, as filled with angels flying their wings, if that's the imagery, symbols, ideas in your head, then that's the kind of thing you're going to see. If someone is brought up with a different symbol, different imagery, that's what they're going to see. And when they report what they see, they are very honest, they're truthful. It's not denying their experience. But this is a very interesting question, that whatever we experience, is it necessarily out there in exactly the same way? It's a little bit like this. And I was discussing this some time back also with a few friends, that the difference between what a camera sees and what my eyes see. And I've given this example earlier. So there is a camera just next to me here, and of course my eyes are here and there is a camera there. In some sense, both of us are seeing the same thing, but in some sense not. The camera will report exactly things as they are, because the camera does not react. The camera simply records. Now our eyes don't simply record what is in front. We also contribute towards it, because all the sensations that we get through the eyes go to the brain, and brain is a very active participant in this whole process of perception. In fact, research has shown that whatever it is that we see, only 20% is what the eyes record. 80% of what we see is provided by the brain. Is provided by, it's more an interpretation of what we see than only what we see. And that interpretation is based on either our own experience or our knowledge, or what we have read, what we have heard, and what we have seen ourselves. It's like this. When you see something for the first time, say you have never seen something before, it's for the first time you see it, that time there is not much to interpret there because you don't have an existing knowledge of that thing. You don't have any experience of that thing. So you're really seeing it. Now, once you see it first time, there's already some impression, some experience, some knowledge. The second time you see it, it becomes much quicker. Think about it this way. If someone has never seen a car before, so first time in your life, you see some object. And so it's very difficult to imagine anyone. Let's say a little baby, a little child, first time you take the child out of the home and sees this huge thing. And then it sees, and then the child will notice everything. Oh, it's a big thing. There are these 4 kind of wheels, and although it may not have the terminology to describe it, it's seeing it. But once that impression becomes firm in my mind, that this object, shaped in this way, doing these kind of things, is a car. So next time I see a car, I don't have to be kind of scanning the whole object to see it has 4 wheels, it has this, no. I just kind of glance there and I know it's a car. So the first seeing an object and the subsequent seeings, there is a difference. Now, why is it that the second time I see it, I don't have to spend so much time over it? Because my past impression is already stored in the brain. So my brain kind of just scans it and says, okay, that's a car. So I don't worry too much about it. Now, as we have been around on this planet for some years, we already have lots of impressions about lots of things. Not just about objects, about people. So the moment we encounter these objects or encounter these people, my brain already send all the signal. Okay, I know this, what it is. I know this person. I know this place. I know it's like this. And so eyes don't have to do much, because the brain supplies most of the information. The danger in this, there is an advantage in this. The advantage in this is, every time I meet someone, I don't like, oh, this is a total stranger. Who are you? Who are you? What's your name? What do you do? No, we already know a person, you remember all of that. So there is an advantage, you save time. The disadvantage is, because I'm not then seeing that person or that object fully, I'm interpreting based on my earlier impressions, I really stop seeing. And to give you an example, let's say sometimes, and it often happens, if you have, say, a bunch of remotes at home, one for your television, one for this, one for that, and sometimes you forget where you have kept it. How often have you looked for your remote here and there, or looked for a missing key? You never missed a key? Never? Or a remote anywhere? Yeah, I think at some time or the other. Now, sometimes you'll find, let's say this is the remote, okay? Imagine this is the remote. And it's right, oh, this is the key, for instance. Keep this. This is my car key. And I have to go out somewhere and say, oh, where's my key? And I look everywhere, and I don't find it. And I panic. I search everywhere. And after going about all the possible places where I may have left my key, and then you find it's right there on the table. And then you see it and say, oh, it's right here. Now, what had happened was this. You had looked at the table before, but you didn't see it. But the key was there, you didn't see it. The reason you didn't see it because you didn't expect it to be there. The moment you looked at the table, your brain supplied the information like, this is what a table is going to be like. And so you didn't really see it there. The next time then you see it carefully and you say, oh, it's right here. So that's how our brain supplies the stored information and impressions, and we stop seeing things. That's why this one little great booklet had come, and if you get a chance, you can read it. It's very nice. It's called, I think it's titled Beginner's Eyes or Beginner's Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. The idea is great. That is, You can look at it sometimes when you're little babies, when they look at everything, you can just see the look in their eyes, as if like everything they see, they're seeing it so intently, because for them, it's pretty much everything they're seeing is like for the first time. But then as we grow older, we are like, oh yeah, okay, I know this. And then we stop really seeing. And I tell you my own experience, it happened probably a year or two ago. I'm just walking along, went for a walk along Kenmore Square. And just right here, just a block or two along Beacon Street, there is this one building. It's always been there, right from the time I've been in this country for so many years. And I passed by, and that was the day I actually saw the building. It is so close to from where the center is. And I was struck by, I said, it was so beautiful. It's such great architecture. I just stood there for 2 minutes, enjoying just it's an old building and the beauty of it. And then I saw, well, this was not the first time I was seeing it. I passed by that road so many times. But again, the moment your brain says, oh, this is the building, this is the road, this is what I need to go. But then you stop and say, oh, here is something right close by. Now this, and although I'm giving this example about objects, this is true about the people in our lives as well. Even members of our own family, our friends. We might think, oh, I've known this person for 25 years or 30 years, but maybe not. Maybe I haven't really seen that person. I may be looking at that person, but I haven't really seen that person. Because, as I said, 80% is just the mind supplying past ideas, past impressions. And we must break through this bondage of these past impressions, because if my whole life is going to be guided only by these stored impressions, then I'm not going to learn anything new. Especially if those impressions are not accurate, especially if those impressions are superficial. Then my whole life is going to be superficial, because that's what is going to guide me. So one helpful practice is, whenever you see something, whenever you read something, whenever you study something, don't begin with the idea, oh, I know it. I mean, that's true with the Gita as well. Now, because we are studying this verse by verse, and then maybe afterwards, someday you pick up the book and say, oh yeah, I attended the Gita classes, I know what it is, then you're never going to learn anything new. So even though you may have studied the book many times, when you pick it up, think as if you're reading it for the first time. And then you might discover in it some meaning, some truth, some idea that you may not have seen before. Now, many of us read the Gospel of Ramakrishna every day. And for those of us who have been doing it every day, it's not like every page has something new. You'll find lots of repetitions, lots of examples are repeated, lots of stories are repeated. But again, as you're reading it, if you say, oh, I know what this story is, I know what it says, I've read it many times before, then you're not going to learn anything from it. So when you read it, keep all your past memories aside. Read it as if you're reading for the first time. Then you might discover in it some great truth which you may have missed on earlier readings. Similarly, when you meet with people, even people whom you have known, as I said, for many years, even your own members of your family, don't go with the presumption, oh, I know this person. No, probably not. Sometimes people can live together for decades and yet not know each other. So get to know, get to see, and you might discover in the other person something you may have missed before. And so this is a very helpful practice, not only to deepen our study of books, but to deepen our relationships, deepen our understanding of life, understanding of everything. And so that is the idea. So whatever we see, whatever our imagination is, that is where we'll go. And therefore, if I learn to see that divine being as infinite, truly infinite, beyond all names and forms, I may worship the divine in a specific name, in a specific form. I will have a mantra, I will have my chosen ideal. But in and through that ideal, I see that infinite being, then that is where I will go. But if my vision remains limited, narrow, exclusive, cutting myself off from others, then it's only that limited entity that I will reach. So we all go wherever we want to go. We all see whatever we want to see. And therefore, from a spiritual standpoint, a very helpful practice is try to see goodness everywhere. If you are just seeing selfishness, bad people, if that's what we see, our whole mind is going to get colored by that. And that doesn't help in spiritual life. That will not improve the quality of my prayer and meditation. On the other hand, if you make a conscious effort to see greatness, goodness everywhere, and as I've mentioned on earlier occasions, even in things and people we don't like, if you really make an effort, you will still find something in those objects or those people, something good. Now, that is not to say that you remain in denial. Surely, everyone, there is good and there is bad everywhere. There is pleasant and unpleasant everywhere. And we need to protect ourselves from evil influences. But having said that, if we make an habit of trying to seek goodness, it helps keep our mind at a level which is very conducive to progress in spiritual life. That helps keep our mind very positive, keep our mind very uplifted. But if all that we see is something negative, then our whole personality becomes negative, and then it affects the quality of our prayer and meditation. So this is the idea that comes to us from this verse 25, that we will go wherever our mind leads us, and our mind will lead us to that place wherever the focus of the mind is. So try to broaden your vision. Have depth as well as breadth. Sometimes people have depth, but it's very narrow. I mean, fanatics. Those who are fanatics, they have great intensity, but it's a very narrow vision. Now, those who are very liberal, they may have a very breadth of vision, but it could be pretty superficial. And you can see some people like, oh yeah, well, God is everywhere, everything is fine. They would think, oh, how universal or broad-minded that person is. But that broad-mindedness can be just a kind of a very superficial thing. What we need is the depth, the intensity of a fanatic, and the breadth of heart of a truly liberal person. Apparently, they don't generally go together, but if we can combine these two, then that's the kind of a person Swami Vivekananda wanted us to be. So these 1, 2, 3 verses that we studied today, 23, 24, 25. So if you have any thoughts, ideas, comments, questions, you're welcome. Yep.
So Swamiji, just building off the last point, I feel on one hand we have to focus in to just recognize the person in front of us and to get to know people who we otherwise may neglect. But I feel we also have to focus out to see the divine is infinite. So just really building on the last point, how do we have both depth and breadth in a practical daily?
Yeah, as I said, it's not easy, but that's the goal before us. So it's just like everything in life, you need to take a close view of things, but you also need a freedom to step back and see it in a larger picture. So that's what it is. See everything at a close view, see the divine present in the person in front of you, see goodness there, but also then step back and see it's the divine pervading everyone. And same thing with regard to the choices we make in life as well. Oftentimes, we'll have to make choices, sometimes on an everyday basis. Some are of a smaller magnitude, some are major choices. But no matter whether small or big, we need to go deep into that, see the pros and cons and make a choice. But before you take your final decision, you must also step back and see how that little thing fits into the larger picture. So you must kind of have this close view and a long range view. If you can combine that, then it's much easier to have both intensity and breadth.
Swamiji, in our Hindu religion, we have so many gods, demigods, goddesses, and also demigoddesses. But ultimately, all these, God is one, and God is infinite. Sometimes we pray one God or one goddess, or sometimes even also we pray a demigod, a Swami or a Guru and all that. We visit the ashrams and all that. Now, how do we reconcile this? Because the ultimate objective is to pray God and the infinite. God and the infinite. So how do we reconcile this?
That's exactly when we saw in verse 24 that all the prayers and everything really goes to that one supreme being.
Right.
So no matter who you are praying to, it all is going to that supreme being. But if you are doing it consciously, that I'm praying this particular entity, but I know that it's the same supreme being appearing to me in this form, or this is the window toward that supreme being, then you're okay. But if the god or demigod you're worshipping to is a god separated from others, then in your mind, it's a limited entity. And therefore, although your prayers are going to the same being, you don't get the benefit because your mind is still locked up in that finite perception. So what we need to do is recognize that when we pray, whoever our heart adores, if we are able to recognize and see that it's the same infinite divine being through that object of your adoration, then you will reach that infinite being. So, but that's the idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
Swamiji, the last point about depth and breadth. If we've chosen Ishta, Devata, and we completely just focus on just that, at what point do you start to see that particular entity as being a doorway to the infinite? Because it's kind of like beyond concept.
No, it's not that you start. The thing is this: even when you are praying and meditating on a divine form or a divine name, who may be a specific personality, even when you're doing that, you should be able to see beyond that personality. So it's not like, oh, for this first 10 years I'm going to do this and then I'm going to switch over. It's a simultaneous thing. It's like, and our mind has that capacity of seeing something and recognizing the deeper reality behind it. I mean, it's like this. It's, for instance, now let's say a computer. Now you are working on your computer. Now if you have no technical knowledge at all, then you're just going to see the screen and you know, well, it works, just works. But if you know what's really behind it, then you know that it's not just a screen. You just get one screen, nothing is going to come. There is stuff inside that. And I myself don't know all the technical terms, but there's a lot of stuff inside it which is really making it work. That's how this, whatever you want, appears on the screen. So you can still continue working on that screen with the awareness that there is deeper things behind it. And so you don't stop working on the screen just because you know it. You know it's helpful, but you know that the screen itself is not the whole story. Exactly in the same way, when we pray and worship, and we all have our Ishta, we have this thing, but you know that that form and that name and that personality, there is a deeper thing beyond that. In fact, it's that infinite consciousness is coming to me through this form, through this name. In fact, the evening Vespers that we sing, which is composed by Swami Vivekananda, begins with Khandana Bhavabandhana. There's one of the epithets Swami Vivekananda used to refer to Ramakrishna was Chit Ghana Kaya. Now, Chit means consciousness. Ghana means concentrated. Kaya means the body. So, the one way, it's a amazing imagery, it's so helpful that he describes Ramakrishna's form as a concentrated form of consciousness. If consciousness were to kind of come together, packed very tightly in one form, that is Ramakrishna's form. So the body of Ramakrishna, and then you can translate that, and just not Ramakrishna, whoever your chosen deity is, that form of your chosen deity is really this infinite consciousness, kind of tightly packed, and has become more visible, more tangible for me through that form. And why does it need to do it? Why should we have it that way? We don't have to have it that way. If I have the capacity to perceive the infinite as infinite, if I have the capacity to worship the spirit as spirit, I don't need a form or a name. But do we have that capacity? Because we are dealing all through our lives with different forms and different names, and because our perception hasn't become so refined, so subtle yet, it's much easier for us to pray and worship something more tangible, something which the eyes can grasp, something which the mind can hold on to. And that is where Ishta helps. A specific form, a specific name, a specific personality. It helps me to hold the mind down. But my Ishta is not limited to that form, not limited to that name. My Ishta is infinite. But for my benefit, and in a theistic language, sometimes it is because God loves us, it's for our benefit, then God takes that form. And the whole idea of avatar, the whole idea of incarnation is that, well, why is this all-pervading infinite God? Why does God even have to take any form? Why does God have to come down on this planet? Well, the only reason is it's so much more easier for us to perceive and appreciate and recognize and adore that divine being in something more tangible. So it's for our good, for our help, for our benefit, then avatar comes and incarnation comes. But if we limit ourselves, and that's what Krishna has said in a verse which you saw before, I think probably in 3rd or 4th chapter, they said that it is these ignorant people who think of me as just this human body. So it's our ignorance then, if we limit these great ones to be just like human beings like us, then we haven't really understood the mystery of incarnation, mystery of avatar. And avatar is really this infinite being who has taken a human form. And it is a mystery because for all purposes, the infinite being looks and moves and talks and does everything like a human being. And which is how we are able to connect ourselves with that infinite being, because he or she just moves like us. On the other hand, if you look deeply, and then you find they are not really quite like us. There is something different, something special. And so this kind of an interplay of the human and the divine we find in the avatar. It's kind of a threshold. It's like either we are in this room or we are in that room. But if you are standing just in the doorway with one foot in this room and one foot in that room, then you cannot say you're in this room or that room. You're really in both rooms. So an avatar is a little bit like that. It's on the threshold of the human and the divine. You look in one way, but they look like human beings. Then you look in the other way, oh no, they are very divine. And so you find this interplay of both. So that's where the Ishta lies. So good discussion. We will begin when we meet next week on Wednesday, on verse number 26. Om Jananim Saratam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. We bow down to Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. On next Sunday, we'll have the Antar Yoga as usual with prayer, meditation, readings by members, followed by soup, and also a birthday celebration of everyone born in the month of June. So if any of you are born in June, or if your friends or anybody you know born in June, bring them along. We'll have a big cake waiting for them. So that's on Sunday. Next Wednesday, we will continue with the study of the Gita as usual. On Saturday, this coming Saturday and Tuesday, we will have Arati and meditation as usual. Next week, I'm going to announce it now, but don't confuse this thing. So next Sunday is Antar Yoga. But a week after that, we'll have the annual July 4th celebration. But that's on a Saturday. But you will hear more about it on Sunday. So I don't want to make too many announcements now, otherwise it will all get mixed up. So this coming Sunday, Antar Yoga. Okay, now let's conclude with a prayer on page 3 of your books. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.